let's start at the beginning. This is for everybody. So not everybody is a sculptor. Some people identify as potters, and that's great. I hope that you are here as well. So we're going to start with just sketches, just drawings. I like to use two types of things. I like to use really cheap sketchbooks from Muji that I can destroy and not feel precious about. And I also like to use just simple printer paper, because one of the materials that I actually use is the printer. I mean, I use it all the time. It's great to have. Hopefully you have access to one. If you don't, it's easy to throw your imagery onto something and then just print it out at your friend's house or Kinko's or whatever, when you're able to do that. So moving forward. Drawing, it can be something really simple. These are some early drawings of pots, just with like super simple, no shadows, no shading, just different ways of thinking about making drawings, right? Thinking about describing forms. They're really very simple. Hopefully everyone can see. And I recommend just getting a book and filling it with just a bunch of funny little sketches for yourself and just drawings, and figure out what your hand is. And what I mean by that is like what your shorthand is for shapes, what your shorthand is for texture, things like that. Something really simple, super simple. Like I said, it doesn't have to be art. Really, really like simple, the kind of more graphical, the better in some ways, because it's easier for you to come back to them and kind of remember what you were trying to say. Okay, so why make drawings is a great question. And I think it's, there are a lot of reasons, but a couple of the really important reasons is because it gets those shapes and images and ideas out of your head and into a place where you can catalog them. Because once you start seeing what you're drawing, you can see that there's usually some kind of pattern to it. You know, there's some kind of idea that you're working on that you might not have really understood that you were really working at. So it's nice to be able to see several drawings so that you get a chance to really unpack what you're thinking about. And that will allow you to also kind of go a little deeper in your exploration. So that's always a good thing. The other reason drawing is important is because sometimes when you make something, you're not sure when you get started the best way to start. You know, like the best way to, should it be pinched? Should it be extruded? Should it be made in components and then put together later? If you look at your drawing, you can usually unpack what it is and how it is that you're going to make it. For some people, they might feel like this is a way of kind of a problem for them because they like to work organically and intuitively, which I completely get. I feel like just making a drawing and thinking about how to get it started is not going to keep you from having an organic kind of intuitive experience. I think it's kind of the opposite. I think it puts you in a good place to start so that when you actually finish your piece, it's probably closer to your idea than not. So I highly recommend that. Okay, so drawing is important, but like what do I draw is often the question, right? So it depends. I mean, you should really start with kind of what interests you. My interests, as some of you might know, have to do with, as I was talking about with Erin, has to do with cinema. So that being said, I have a lot of drawings about that. Let me get something for you here. And they end up in all sorts of crazy ways. So currently, I'm working on these, what are called sausage projectors. And they start, like most things, with drawing. There's source material, and then there's, again, and this comes out of pottery, I think, in some ways, there's iteration. So a lot of different drawings, different orientations, different ideas. This is also where I start to really appreciate the scanner. I don't know if everyone has one, but if you do, it's a fantastic tool. So what I usually do is I will draw out my images and usually keep it very simple, and then throw it in the scanner and print out for myself just a bunch of black and white, like my own coloring book, basically. And then I start to work on the colors. Sometimes I work the colors before I start the piece. Sometimes I work on the colors after the piece. This really depends on what your vision is. For those people who are throwing, maybe you're thinking about making sets. Maybe you're thinking about iteration, like I talked about before, where you have multiples. It's a really great way of doing that. Also, when it comes to sculpture, I do find that working in this way really helps me to break down the form. So I really feel like I understand what I'm going to be making before I get started, because one of the rules of sculpture, and really clay in general, is that you want things to be of similar thicknesses, and that can be hard to do if you don't think about it first. On top of that, as you scale up, you will find that it's complicated and difficult to make things stand up properly if it's too wet, if it's too heavy, if it's not strong enough. So it really gives me the opportunity to think about, like, do I need to make these things in pieces? Do I need to put things together at different times? Do I need to wait a week between, when this goes on and this is here? So it really helps me figure that out. Okay, so let's talk about going into the studio for a moment and making the work. So what I like to do is I like to bring my organized self to the studio and go in with a packet. These things are great. They're just plastic. They're washable, basically you sponge over it. They're clear, so I just get these clear plastic sleeves, and for each project, I fill it with what pertinent information is. So, for example, this piece that I had just is drying right now. Keep this in bring it with me to the studio back and forth, or I keep it there depending on what's going on. I print out a black and white version and I print out, the color version, which is the version that I am thinking I'm going to work towards. I don't have to make it exactly, but it's in my head, so it's nice to have it on paper so that I don't have to be thinking about it all the time. The reason I print out a black and white version as well is because this way it allows me, for those days when I just want to think about the form and I don't want to have to obsess about the color, I can not look at the color and I can just work on form. And in this case, a lot of these sculptures have, they have linear elements, they have these very formal elements, there's usually a block of some sort in there, but then they have these very amorphous, squishier elements that are in there, but they still have to stand up, so I have to think about how am I going to do that. And then they have these, in the image, the color image, they are collaged into the image. They are these, in my case, there are these slices of deli meats, but you know, it could be anything really. And another version. Sometimes with the printer, I love it, you get the happy accident when you run out of the right color and you end up with the good color, the color you never thought that you wanted, that then you become obsessed with. So that happens, which is always nice. But again, the black and white is great because that just helps you focus on form and not, like I said, obsess or kind of overthink the color before it's even time for that. Okay, so let's say we've got our piece. We have babied it through the process. It's made it through the process of the bisque process, right? So we've been gentle with it. We've dried it properly. We have, it's not cracked. If it's sculpture, you know, you have a lot of other options, but let's say it's this gorgeous pot or something that we're really, really been working really hard towards. So now we have this piece that we feel very, very precious about. What do? Well, usually we want to dive right in and we want to glaze it as soon as possible. And we want to really like see it to its fruition, right? Or on the other hand, we let it sit on our shelf for like 3 months because we don't want to ruin it. And we're afraid of making a mistake. And we're not sure. And it just sits there taunting us, kind of collecting dust. So I like to take the middle road, which has to do with taking as much of the pain and suffering that comes with glazing out of the process if I can. And that means that I have a lot of textiles.